Well, if you were planning on leaving, it's too late.
No, I'm here.
You're stuck with me, man. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, thanks for having me on,
Nick,
dude.
great to see you, man. I think I had to. Did I have to reschedule you last week?
No. I was supposed
Just
to be
tonight.
on at 9 today, but
Okay.
yeah. No, we're
Thank
good.
you.
No,
Appreciate
it's totally good.
I'm very blessed for people being dynamic in their schedule because I fucking can never get my shit together.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sitting
You're
down,
good,
man.
Of
I
course.
usually like to start these conversations with a very simple: Who are you, and what do you do?
Yeah. So, my name's Nick. I have credit repair business with my dad. I'm part of a real estate group as well, and that's just residential real estate, commercial real estate. And then I also Twitch stream about politics, mainly focusing on like government corruption and what's happening, outside of like more so the mainstream narrative, but still presenting kind of like the facts that are laid out behind it.
So I didn't realize. I'm just going to turn you up a little bit.
No, you're good.
I didn't realize that you. Oh, I turned. Check test 1
Hello?
2.
Might be a little high. Is this good? Okay.
I see what's happening there. 1 2 3.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
Yeah, it's still learning my new mixer there.
You're good.
So I didn't realize that you Twitch stream about politics and about government corruption. I thought it was just a passion of yours.
It is a passion of mine. The Twitch streaming, I've done it a little bit. I've been going a little bit further with it recently, just because I find myself always talking about it anyway. So I'd rather talk about it in a situation, a space where I can actually try to educate people on like the way government actually works, is supposed to work historically, how it should work, or how it did work at one point, and why things work the way they do now.
This is one of the big reasons I started this podcast. It was actually my wife who insisted, like, you should start a podcast. You should start a podcast. And I remember thinking, like, God, she's being so encouraging and supportive. Like, what is that about? And then I realized she was just tired of hearing all the shit that I found on the internet and all of my, crazy schemes about how the government's screwing people over.
Oh, yeah.
So she's like, go tell that shit to the internet,
Yeah.
But it's a great release. And like you said, it's nice to have it in a place where other people can learn from it,
Oh yeah, and I mean, I would say when it comes to that, specifically, politics can be very like polarizing. When it comes down to it, most people don't realize how it actually works. Most people don't realize that, like in America, for instance, corruption is fully legalized. It goes by lobbying, so you'll hear that term all over the place. Lobbying is really just like a fancy way of saying a corporation, a billionaire, a political interest, even a foreign country can donate essentially unlimited sums of money to candidates to influence their candidacy.
So it's legal bribery, correct?
Literally.
Hold that thought.
Hey, Jordy, that fee release, can you do it at the lowest amount possible? Yeah, you got that. Like after it stops, you'll have a little. Thank you.
Sorry about that, dude.
No,
Jordan doesn't usually work during the podcast, so I just had to update him real quick.
You're totally good.
So we're talking about legal bribery.
Yeah.
And, how long has this been going on? Is this something that's like always been a part of the...
Yeah, I mean, like, so bribery in general, it's always been a thing. In the capacity it's at now, it started back in like the 70s, basically, but it really hit overdrive in about 2009. In 2009, the Supreme Court passed a ruling called Citizens United. And what that did was it basically said that a corporation is a person. And due to the fact that it's a person, it can donate unlimited sums of money into campaigns because of free speech. So it's a very like, I mean, it's I'll just say what it is. It's dumb. Like it makes no sense. It's stupid. Can you curse on this podcast?
You can say whatever the fuck you want,
like
buddy.
whatever I can say. Okay.
Yeah.
So like it's a really stupid workaround, and it's not even a workaround. They literally gave the more rights than a normal person has to a corporation. In doing that, for instance, the pharmaceutical industry can donate hundreds of millions of dollars a year, which they typically do. And that's why we pay the highest cost of prescription for prescription drugs basically in the entire world. And on top of that, a lot of the prescription drugs are actually taxpayer funded researched and everything.
Yeah, this is one of the things I heard about the vaccine was that all of the research that got us to get that vaccine was publicly funded.
Yeah.
Then we end up with this, miracle vaccine that came out, like it was pretty impressive that we have it out,
Yeah.
right? And then the Pfizer is selling it to the United States government for $25 a dose, $15 a dose, when it costs them a few dollars to make.
Yep.
And they're making billions of dollars. But I understand that that's the same in probably other pharmaceuticals.
It's every industry across the board. For instance, like just so everyone can relate on this one, insulin was researched by the government, created by the government. It was sold to I forget which company it was for $1. That company, which again lobbied to get that under its control, got the patent rights for it, and now creates insulin for hundreds, thousands of dollars a year per patient.
It's sick, man. It's sick.
And that's just pharmaceuticals. I mean, the health insurance industry is the same thing. We pay double what any other, nation on earth pays, and we have by far like the worst system. Doesn't matter. Like you could have your opinions on universal healthcare, whatever it is. We all have our own opinions, but fact of the matter is, Americans, we have like 60 million uninsured, underinsured people a year. 60,000 people a year die because they can't get treatment or they get there too late because they couldn't afford it to begin with. And then on top of that, we have out of all like the top 40 nations, we have the 37th we're 37th in line in terms of our healthcare industry.
Like the quality of healthcare that we get.
And we pay double the top person.
So I feel like people's argument for how much we pay for healthcare is because we have the best healthcare system in the world. People are like, oh, you could go to Canada and wait in line for months. But I've been through the hospital systems in our country, and maybe it's anecdotal, but it's a nightmare.
So, yeah, I mean, like the anecdotes are a nightmare. But even when you look at the macro statistics of the situation, it's just as worse. I mean, if you have a ton of money, yeah, I mean, we have a great healthcare system because you don't have to worry about insurance or anything else. For the average person, most of their insurance is typically attached to their work, basically, which means that number one, they're essentially like stuck with their job that they might hate due to the fact that if they leave that job, they lose their healthcare, and then God forbid whatever happens at that point. Again, like I said, 60 million Americans are literally underinsured or full on underinsured, even with like a subsidy like Obamacare or the ACA. In terms of Canada, like lines and everything like that, I mean, right now, what we have is so much worse than even like that. And even still, like, if you get sick in Canada, like you get like tonsillitis in Canada, you can go to the doctor, get surgery, and be done with that in a month. An average person in America that doesn't have healthcare will most likely not get that surgery done until their tonsils literally just like burst.
Yeah.
So it's like, pick your poison. Like I would rather have the ability to get the surgery or like, for instance, not die of cancer.
Yeah.
Just because I can't afford it, as opposed to, essentially just letting God take the wheel and we'll just see what happens. And on top of that, their success rate speaks for itself. The macro statistics behind all those healthcare systems speaks for itself. It's just a better system, and they pay way less.
And I can't help but when we start talking about healthcare, think about the diet of the average American, right?
Yeah.
Like it seems as if there's a concerted effort to keep us all fat and sick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, like, number one, like, so now it gets into like the food industry.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like in America, we put stuff in our foods that most other developed countries do not touch, right? Like high fructose corn syrup. The corn lobby is like the largest agricultural lobbying industry in the country. So that's why we have high fructose corn syrup and everything. We don't even use real cane sugar. We use, essentially another sweetener, basically, that is high in calories. It's detrimental to your health. And again, like it's in everything. Like unless you're buying organic food or you look on the label and it shows sugar cane, basically, as one of the ingredients, it's going to be either high fructose corn syrup or another like sweetener that again is just not as good. And it's going to cause health effects down the road.
That's because the corn industry is lobbying
The
food
government.
manufacturers or the
No,
government?
I mean the corn industry, like they're lobbying the government. Like the system's been built out for now decades, so it's like to change that system costs money. So in order to essentially do the right thing, it's the incentives aren't there, and that's due to the fact that like if you have an industry that's built out and they've been lobbying the government for years, and there's no incentive to change the structure of it, even though like on a society scale, like it'd be much better to have people just overall be healthier, but
On what metric though? Because all of the people who are sitting at these tables with food and government and medicine, like they want people fat and sick, right?
Well, yeah, I
Because
mean,
there's
we don't
no
have a-
money in the cure. There's money in the treatment.
exactly, we don't have a preventative disease care healthcare system, right? Like we have, you get sick, you're gonna get treated, and you're gonna get released. For instance, like let's say we did have a cure for cancer. Do you really think that that would be too accessible to the average person? Of course not, because if you have a cure for cancer, it'll cost, a fraction of what it would take to like go through an entire chemo treatment.
Yeah.
And it's just not financially viable for these companies that, a pharmaceutical company that's on Wall Street, and they have fiduciary responsibility to increase their profit margins for their shareholders. The only way they do that is by making it more expensive and making it less accessible for the average person. And on top of that, until recently, there were laws on the books that said the government can't even negotiate with these industries or the pharmaceutical industry to essentially, negotiate the prices down, which every other country does. And the funny part is the VA does do that in America. They've been doing it for 30 years. So the VA, compared to the average person, pays less for prescription drugs than like your typical American. And I'm not saying that shouldn't happen. I'm saying
Right.
everyone should have access to cheap medicine, especially when these companies are getting subsidized by those very same Americans.
There's something very strange with the relationship with the pharmaceutical industry and our country when it comes to we're one of two countries in the world where advertising medicine on television is legal. Everywhere else this is illegal. I think it's here in New Zealand.
Yeah, it is.
And then I also heard a statistic that 75% of all television ads are pharmaceutical ads.
Yeah, I saw
Right?
I saw that same statistic.
So it's
something
like
insane.
if you want to have somebody who's being objective on certain science or holding people accountable, like if I'm doing terrible work or hurting people, but I'm signing your check every day, it's not going to be into your best interest to tell anybody that I'm doing a horrible job.
Yeah.
So, whether it's the media companies who should be saying, like, if you're what's the word I'm looking, a journalist, and you're
Yeah.
looking up wrongdoings by corporations,
Yeah.
you're not going to bark up the pharmaceutical industry tree because your boss is going to let you go because you're fucking up our money.
Well, that's exactly it, right? So, like, if you work for CNN or Fox News or any of these other companies, the mainstream media basically is the term for it. If you're working for these companies and like all of your commercials are paid for by the oil industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and the military industrial complex, to have an opinion on that same news source that is contrary to that industry, is detrimental to their bottom line. And again, we're talking for-profit companies
Yeah.
that have fiduciary responsibilities to their shareholders. So if they do that, they're essentially sabotaging themselves. And that incentive structure goes into politics as well with politicians. Politicians aren't incentivized to make the right decisions, because if they made the right decision and they held a CEO or a company or an entire industry accountable, they would lose the funding to their campaign. So if they want to stay in power, if they want to keep their job, if they want to get a job afterwards that pays for them and puts them on a corporate board and they have a cushion job that pays them $10 million a year for the rest of their lives, they better stay in line.
They're not going to ruffle any feathers.
Yeah, and that's why it's literally like 99% of all the politicians in the country accept political bribes. They accept corporate PAC money due to the fact that the only other way of campaigning is essentially what we saw with Bernie Sanders, where, he was grassroots. He got an average donation of $27 an hour or a person or a donation. And it's a fluke. like he had like his viral moment, and that's the only way. That's the only other way to counter that system.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say this on this podcast. I've been lucky enough to talk to a couple people running for U.S. Senate, a couple people running for Congress, and the people who I've had on are huge in the fact that we don't take corporate PAC dollars.
Yeah.
We are privately funded by our constituents, but in order to compete in the state of Florida, you need like $60 million. And I said,
Yeah.
why would you need that much money? And they said, well, because we have so many counties that it's almost impossible to go canvas county to county. You have to have television advertising
Yeah.
money, and that costs millions of dollars.
Yeah.
You know, so the only way to compete is to take these funds.
Yeah, and it's not even, you know, our politics is almost like the graveyard of idealism, right? Where it's like you can go in with the best intentions.
Can you say that again?
It's almost like the graveyard of idealism, where it's like you go in with the best intentions, but in order to defeat your opponents, unless you're just like that one-off, like a Bernie or one of those types of candidates, you essentially become the monster you fight. And in becoming that, you start seeing the power of the money you get, and it corrupts you. It compromises your ideals. It compromises your opinions, and then you can go from someone that truly was a candidate for like the general American's interests. Could go from that to essentially a corporate sellout, and once you make that choice, it's there's really no turning back. Just because like in a lot of people's eyes, you've betrayed them, and like why should they trust you?
Do you think that that's what we saw with, and I'm very ignorant, right? This is why I'm glad you're on, because I know you have done lots of research, and but I feel like that might have been what happened with Obama. Obama promised so much, right? It was change and hope, right? And then if you look at what he was able to get done for just the black community alone, there's a lot of people in the black community who said he didn't do anything for us. You know, like Southside Chicago, where he's from, like is still a war zone.
Yeah.
Right. And he also, oddly enough, won the Now, listen, I think President Obama, to clarify, might have been one of the greatest presidents of our time, as far as like a diplomat. And
In the last 67 years, he was definitely one of the better ones.
I thought he was fantastic, but he also like dropped more. I think we talked about this. Dropped more drone bombs than any other president, and didn't do a lot for the urban community. But he promised a lot. Do you think that has something to do with once you get there, you realize, oh, well, there's nothing I can fucking do?
Well, yeah. So specifically with Obama, right?
Yeah.
Obama at the time, when he ran for president, he was Wall Street's #1 pick. Wall Street donated more money to him than any other candidate they ever had before. When you look at his cabinet, he had Wall Street executives on that cabinet. So again, the president, he's like the buck stops with him, but the real work is done in his cabinet and all the departments that are working under the executive branch. So, you know, if Obama doesn't put in the right person for antitrust, if he doesn't put in the right person for, you know, labor and all these different branches of the executive branch, it's not going to get done. So with Obama, like the thing about Obama that really sucks is he was the first Democrat that won with the message he had in a long time. He had a supermajority in Congress, meaning his legislation could pass. You weren't dealing with like a 50-50 split Senate, which is still bullshit. You know, like if Biden wanted to, he could really pass monumental reforms just by using the power of the bully pulpit, the voice, the microphone of the president, basically to get the other Democrats that aren't on board. But Obama didn't do that, and due to that, and then on top of that, like when you look at what he did to bail out 2008, instead of bailing out the average American, he bailed out the corporations that, in a lot of ways, created that crisis. So you know, if corporate executives on Wall Street create a situation where they bankrupt the entire economy, basically, and they destroy tens of thousands of people's lives across the country. Um, Thousands of people were truly hurt by that. People killed themselves during that time period. Those corporate executives should have been held liable, and not even that, they should have been criminally investigated.
I don't think there was one single charge that came from that
No,
whole
in
nightmare.
fact, the bailouts went to them. So they were essentially incentivized
Rewarded.
to fail. Yeah, because they made money on the way up and they made money on the way down. So why do the right thing, even in their and even in their position, where they're essentially the opposition to the American people?
Which seems pretty counterintuitive for what most people are used to think for when you think of the Democratic Party. It's like for the people, it's about middle America, it's about equality for all, but like that's showing, loyalty to big banks, right?
Well, yeah, and another thing is like, yeah, like the Democratic Party from like the early 1900s to like 1970, more or less, they were like the party of labor. They were the party of the people. Like, FDR, the policies of the New Deal, essentially creating a giant social safety net that he couldn't complete because he just happened to die in office. Those policies led to the formation of the middle class that we still brag about today in America. It was social reforms and reining in Wall Street and reining in the big financial monopolies that created the middle class, because in FDR's policies, he essentially redistributed the wealth in America. In the 1890s, you had the Gilded Era, the Gilded Age, and it was basically just like today. You had a select few companies that own most of the companies, most of the assets in America. In fact, we have more wealth inequality now than we did back then. And what they did was they used antitrust. They broke up a lot of the larger corporations like Standard Oil, Rockefeller's company. They broke them up into 100 pieces because it wasn't viable to have a company that could literally match the power of the federal government at that point and all the state governments that are under it. It's not viable to have private equity, private power, corporate power to rival the government. If you have that situation, understand a corporation, not a typical mom and pop corporation, but like a multinational $1 trillion company, their only goal is to seek more profit. And in doing that, they become tyrannical towards the people that they hire. Especially like if you think about the dynamic of like a worker employer relationship. The worker shows up, they have to do their job. If they don't do it right, and like Amazon, for instance, they'll send you a text saying you're fired. They'll send you a text you're fired anyways, just because they don't want long-term employees there. Your healthcare is tied to them. So if you do anything a little out of step, or you get sick, but like you ran out of sick days or whatever it is, you get fired anyways, then you lose your healthcare. We have a situation in America where workers are more so like indentured servants to these giant companies. And those companies are lobbying the government to give them more and more power over the average person.
How did we get back here from the age of FDR? Has it just been a slow crawl back to where we are now?
Yeah, so FDR was probably hands down the most progressive president we've had. I mean, he makes Bernie Sanders look conservative in a lot of ways. FDR basically checked them. He checkmated them. He took the power that they held and gave it back to the hands of the people. Like the average CEO, 70 years ago made 33 times their lowest paid employee. Now the average is 350 times. So it's like he leveled the scales.
Right.
It's not saying like I'm not a capitalist or I'm not this or whatever label you want to go with. It's simply saying that if you're a worker, you have just inalienable human rights. And like, if you're not free in an economic sense, then you're not free in general. Because if you're beholden to the corporation that hires you and you're not part of a union that can help fight for you, then you're a servant to that corporation. You're not an employee. You're a wage slave, basically. And that's the situation. We have so much wealth inequality in America. And it shows in our society. If you look at depression, if you look at just like the ills of society, right? Like just overwhelming poverty, overwhelming despair, it seems like society is collapsing. A large part of that is due to the economic inequalities that people face. If your coping mechanism, because you just can't handle the world anymore, is to do drugs, and you're not giving and you're not given an outlet to get out of that hole, well, then your despair is going to grow, and you're going to kill yourself. You're going to do drugs to cope. You're going to overdose from those drugs. I mean, you name it, it'll happen. You'll die from a heart attack because you just worked every day of your life and you never got to live to begin with.
Yeah.
And that's the situation we have. I mean, like, it's the real conversation is not right and left. I mean, the real conversation is if you're part of like the bottom 99%, you're on the same side. You might not agree culturally, but in terms of like your best interests are to unite under one umbrella of just saying we deserve better than this. We can figure out the cultural issues after this, but to unite for economic equality is hands down the best thing that could happen, and that does happen through the labor movement. If I don't care if you're a conservative or a liberal or a progressive or anything else, everyone needs to start learning what it means to organize in your workplace, form a union, stand up for yourselves in a real way. Like, how can you say you're free just because you live in America, or how can you say you're free because you're allowed to buy guns, or whatever other reasoning for your freedom that you feel you have? If you're not free to take a piss at work because you're going to get fired by text because of Amazon, you're not free. If you can't be with your wife when she's having a kid because you don't have the time, you're not free. And just take that across the board. The average person deserves better.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the things that, I guess I want to learn or figure out, there's so many variables and so many things that are tied into the cost of doing business, right? So for instance, we're a small business here,
Yeah.
right? And if our employees were to band together and create a union and say, we're not going to work unless you pay us, in Palm Beach County, a livable wage, right? Well, it's a little different here because our staff works on tips, right?
Yeah.
Also, and hourly. But what happens to the cost of goods when the workers demand a wage that will support them in an economy that's like, I don't know if you understand what I'm getting at here. The cost of living in Palm Beach County.
You're speaking specifically for small businesses because like it's a little you run tighter
yes.
margins.
Yes.
When it comes to a transition to another economic model, you really do need government support there. Because like if you've been paying your entire population, the majority of your population, a sub-living wage, to expect small businesses to all of a sudden be like, yeah, we just have the money, we just didn't want to pay you guys, like, sorry.
Right.
That's not the case.
Yeah.
There is an adjustment. I think the government needs to step in for small businesses especially.
Do you mean like subsidizing pay for
just because
employees?
like there's no perfect solution to anything,
Yeah.
but even to go back to where we were, there needs to be some transitionary assistance to like help small businesses I would rather keep all the small businesses in business and subsidize the wages they have to make up, as opposed to like subsidizing Apple, because Apple makes billions of dollars a year in profit
Using slave labor, by the way.
Essentially. Oh yeah, in
Those
China.
cell phones. Yeah.
In China, yeah. And then when it comes
Just
here,
terrible.
you have essentially indentured servitude.
Right.
And it's terrible just due to the fact that like in America, because this has been going on for generations now, your average American today isn't going to know what it was like to actually work 40 hours a week and be able to live a good life.
Yeah.
Now you work 40 hours a week. If you're getting paid a subpar wage, which
You
is going
can
to be
still
the general.
barely afford to live. I mean,
like
see
you
that
can't.
in
You
Palm
have
Beach
to work.
County.
You talk to the average person, they got a side hustle, they got this, they got that, they got, like they're whatever it is, whatever little niche they have, they're trying to stream on Twitch.
Which I honestly respect, right? And I understand that, like, your side hustle has to have a side hustle, and nobody's going to do it for you. And like my wife and I are entrepreneurs. Our last business was decimated because of COVID.
For sure.
Right? It was a fitness facility that the news was saying the gyms were the most dangerous place you could go to.
Yeah.
And we weren't ready. We weren't done yet. We weren't ready to tuck our tail. So we
Yeah.
pivoted. We dumped every dollar from this little. I was working for a company that makes industrial air and surface sanitation equipment and building and selling those. And we put every dollar into this place. And knock on wood, the community showed up once we opened. You know, but you have to. I think there's a. Rogan talks about the difference between like pay equality and effort equality.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a portion of our population who don't have the same willingness to fucking bust ass.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's a fine line there, right? Like, what do you feel about universal basic income?
I mean, it just depends on the situation, right? Like, if half our workforce gets automated in the next 20 years, there's really only one way to do that, and that's literally to have a universal basic income.
Yes.
I know what you mean, though. Like, my position isn't to say, like, I want to demonize hard work or effort, right? I mean, like, I have 2 businesses. I work
I know you
14
do.
plus hours a day,
Yeah.
6-7 days a week.
Yeah.
My qualm is not with hard work. It's where society has slowly been brought over the course of 60 years of growing corporate power and interest in our government.
Yeah. And this is due to large corporations
Large
that are
corporations, billionaire
looking
interests.
at profits over people.
Well, yeah. I mean, like a corporation's job is to look at profits over people, right? And the job of the government is to ensure the protection of those people. And the jobs of a labor movement or the jobs of a union is to bring an equal branch of representation to the workplace.
Yeah.
So it's like when it comes to a corporation is doing exactly what a corporation needs to do by increasing their profit margins, even if that's in the worst way possible. The job of the government's to regulate, to say you can't just pay your employee $15 an hour, give them this raise, and then cut all their benefits, and then on top of that, text them when they get fired, give them no reasoning for it. Like force them to piss in bottles because the bathroom's 20 minutes away walking.
Yeah. I've heard all these stories. They're horror stories.
And they're real stories.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
Like if you see if you look at like what it took for the first Amazon union to happen up in Staten Island, like it's insane. Like the laws that Amazon broke on a daily basis was staggering. And Starbucks is the same thing, like closing down locations unjustified, doing whatever it takes, like doing like anti-union propaganda in the workplace, breaking the laws to ensure unions can't spread the vote, spread the word for the vote. Whatever it took, breaking laws, because they'd rather get fines and just break the law as opposed to,
it actually costs less to pay the fines.
Well, it costs less to pay the fines. It costs less to close down production facilities or storefronts. But it's not like it costs that much less. Like if Amazon were to take 10% of their profits and just give it back to their workers, number one, they'd still be one of the largest companies in America.
Yeah.
And their workforce would live middle-class lives or
Right.
working or good lives, basically. You can work 40 hours a week and live in the middle class, buy a house, be able to like feel fulfilled within like your life outside of the workplace.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to like what you were saying, like, there's a bunch of people that just aren't really like too thrilled to work, and they're not like, they don't put a lot of effort in. Like I have a lot of friends that are in that position, and the main reason, it's not like they were like inherently lazy. It's just like when you feel like the world is against you, you feel nihilistic about everything, and it's been proven to you over and over through your perspective lens. And you see the government not willing to do anything for you, corporations getting more and more aggressive towards you, and society as a whole seemingly falling apart. To me,
You get to a point where you just want to throw your hands in the air.
what's the point?
Yeah. I understand
And like
that.
that's not even like, I think if the government were to start fixing problems, and you have like a unified vision for the country and you motivate people to do their best, that's really, as opposed to American history, that's really what seems to be missing now. Is in the past, as bad as it got, Americans were relatively optimistic about the future. They were willing
Oh,
to
yeah.
work for their country. They were willing to put their best foot forward. I feel like now that's missing.
Yeah.
And I think on a societal level, it looks in part like that. It looks in part like, society's crumbling, or people don't have really the motivation to do anything. They're depressed. And I'm not saying it's the only reason, but like, I think if you just add all the different circumstances in people's lives up, on, of course, an anecdotal basis, and then spread that over to an entire population, I think you start seeing things like that.
Yeah, on reasons why people have just given up.
Yeah, I mean,
But
like,
see, for me, I use it as like a motivator of like, I'm not going to allow the nonsense that we deal with to hold me back. I can't. I'm married. I have a wife who's looking to me to provide. Nobody else is going to do it for me. So I fucking bust my ass, just like you
Yeah.
know, fuck 15, 16-hour days, easy 100 hours a week. And that's just to keep my business operational. That doesn't include what I do at home. But I also feel like I'm making up for lost time in my 20s, where I thought I was going to be an international superstar from being a rapper. And I was hoping I was sure somebody was going to show up with a check and say, dude, you're the most talented person I ever met. Here's $250,000. Have at it. So since I feel like I'm making up for lost time, I don't even question it. I'm just like, get up, go,
sure.
you know? But I understand how people can be frustrated and feel like that, the government has fucked us over, but I also think that nobody's going to fucking do it for you. You got to
Yeah.
get out there and fucking hustle. But the problem is Palm Beach County, again, I'll go back to it as a great
Yeah.
example. You could have 3 jobs in this county and still not afford $2,400 for a 1-bedroom apartment.
I mean, like, yeah, like, I mean, even like you talk about that, right? Like,
I'm going to remind you, just stay right up in
oh
the
yeah,
mic.
yeah, sorry.
I just want people to be able to hear
Now I
you.
start like getting lax.
It's all good. You're good.
But no, like, I mean, that's a perfect example, right? Like 3 years ago, you were making the same amount of money on average. You might be making 2% more right now based on like what the statistics show wages have gone up by.
Right.
But at the same time, rent has gone up 30% alone.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so I'm going to have to get another job just to pay for my living situation. Okay, well, now everything else is more expensive. Gas, knock on wood, has gone down. But for a minute, it was like, what, $5 a gallon or
Isn't
something?
that funny how we're like, yes, it went down to $3.50.
Yeah.
$3.50 is still very high from what it was. I remember as a kid seeing gas for $100 or $1.50, $1.60.
2 years ago, I mean, like, mind you, COVID was happening, so the demand was way down.
Right.
But 2 years ago was $1.50. And I mean, like, again, like, you look at, like, we'll just stick on the topic because, like, I feel like I could just go down rabbit holes. But,
No
like,
doubt.
you see that entire picture. You see your cost of living go up 40% year over year. It doesn't matter. They can raise your wages 10% and it's not going to matter. And at the end of the day, you're still going to have to get a second job or even a third job. I mean, it's insane that like in Palm Beach County, that's even a thing. Like in terms of rent, like I'm not saying like completely regulate and say like, oh man, we need to like throw rent controls. You're not allowed to pay more than $1,500 in this area. It's illegal. Like I'm not saying put like the most stringent rent controls in place, but to simply say like, maybe we should use some like taxpayer dollars to start building some more affordable homes for people. To alleviate the amount of people looking, and then like,
how are we going to do that if we're sending 40 billion of it to Ukraine?
well, I mean, that's one piece. Well, I mean, so like we're talking Palm Beach County and the taxpayer dollars of Palm Beach, right?
Okay, understood.
But I mean, you're talking my language here. So like, yeah, we spent $40 billion sending it to Ukraine. It costs $40 billion to end homelessness in America.
Yeah.
Build public housing. Like there's never a solution that's going to seem perfect. But if you can build public rent controlled housing, number one, you're creating a position in the market where now you're putting in like almost an artificial competitive nature to the rental market due to the fact that you're going to have like, if you build 5,000 units of rent controlled housing, now landlords are going to have to compete with that, right? So it's like, keep it competitive. You can keep it like fair market value, But at the same time, ensure that like you're not going to have people living in their cars, people working 3 jobs just to survive. You're going to create a condition in the market that will lower rents a bit. Like for instance, people that go for Section 8 right now, they can't even get Section 8 because Section 8 has a cap on the money they're willing to give per area. So if your zip code, they say they'll only pay up to $1,700 for a unit, but the market value of the rent in that area is $2,000. You can't get Section 8 in there unless the landlord comes down on their price, or you pay out of pocket on top of the Section 8 on essentially a separate lease.
Yeah.
So it's like, so if you qualify for Section 8, but you can't even use the voucher due to the fact that, the rents are beyond what Section 8 has appropriated to the people that qualify for it. You're never gonna help people with that money. Like, I think giving like a stipulation saying you can only increase your rents 3% year over year, doing like rent control, or like putting in regulations to stop like 30% increases in rent year over year, I think is the most like moral way to do it in the system we have.
Do you think we're like we've only been talking for 20 minutes and it feels like we're fucked?
Well, I mean, like,
Do you think we're doomed?
No. So it's very easy to come like that. I'm a naturally optimistic person.
Yeah, same.
I would rather spread awareness, whether it be like in this setting. Like we spoke a little bit like the other day just randomly, and I told you my opinion. Like if I do that 5 to 10 times a week with random people or whatever it is, and they learn just a little bit, and we can like debate, and like I'm not gonna give like a judgmental opinion to them that says like you're wrong, I'm right. But if I'm able to at least teach someone something and spread just a little bit of awareness in one place or another, and just try my best to spread like this type of message to show people that politics is supposed to work for you, not like corporations or rich people or whatever you want to call it. If I'm able to spread that message and everyone's able to do a little bit of that, and you spread awareness, and then people can eventually come together and organize to say we deserve better than this. I truly believe that's possible.
But one of the problems is what you were talking about before. So say we come together, we get Eric. Eric is really, he believes in unions and organizing for laborers, and we get him into a position of power.
Mm-hmm.
The problem goes back to what you said, that here he is in this position of power. In order to keep his position, he has to raise money from corporations, and he ends up then in their pockets. So is it obviously taking big money out of politics?
Yes.
Like, right?
100%.
Yeah.
We need to, I would say that's step number one.
Yeah.
If we want to solve anything, you have to take corporate money out of politics. You have to take billionaire money out of politics. You have to take foreign government money out of politics. Like the Israeli government and any other government on earth can donate millions of dollars to campaigns.
What? That seems
Well,
like,
I mean, it seems
counterintuitive.
insane.
Yeah.
Number one, it goes against national interests.
Right.
It's a genuine national security threat.
Yes.
But that's the reality. If you have foreign lobbyists lobbying on your behalf,
Because all money is green, right? It doesn't matter whether you're red, blue, whatever
that's the main thing, right? Like, in China, for instance, right? Like, I'm not advocating for China before I go any further, and I have to hear that. But like, in China, there was a professor at one of their universities that said the biggest problem with America, and the funniest part is they don't understand it themselves. They take the bottom dollar as the only metric to go by.
What do you mean by bottom dollar?
Or they take, so he basically said like the only thing that matters to Americans is the dollar. Making money, whether it be in politics or whatever else. He said that's their biggest weakness. That was a Chinese professor explaining how the Chinese handle us in terms of like manipulating our system and going against us. If they show a profit incentive to an American company, that American company will lobby on their behalf to let that happen. Because like, for instance, if a corporation has their industry in America and they can they can increase their profit margins by 50% by bringing it over to China, and China's advocating for them to do that, they're going to lobby to make that happen. So it's like that's how something like that would happen.
And we've seen that time and time again, right?
I mean, yeah, like all of our industries in China now because of actions like that.
And COVID really exposed that because
Well, yeah,
when-
because our supply chains fell apart
Yes.
overnight, and then all of a sudden we're like, why can't we get toilet paper? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? It's because we don't make anything here.
yeah,
I mean, we ran out of freaking masks because we don't make them here. We ran out of medical equipment because we don't make it here. And then the Chinese are going to be like, well, we're not going to send it to you guys because we need it here. So, you know, we fucked ourselves. You know what I mean? Like we completely created our own weaknesses. Number one, we created our own worst enemy over there. Number two, to where now we've developed an essentially a rivaling power to our way of life. And we gave them the ability to do that. We gave them our methods of production. We gave them the ability to produce vast amounts of things that we used to do. You know, during World War II, the main reason we were able to win the way we did was due to the fact that we made everything here and we converted all of our factories into wartime factories.
yeah.
If
That's
we weren't
like
able to
Rosie
make
the Riveter, right? When all the
like-
women went to work in the
well,
factories.
literally, like
yeah.
if we weren't able to make the tanks, you'd think we would have been able to have Normandy and D-Day and all those separate excursions happen on the other sides of the world. Like, I mean, we single-handedly in World War II defeated the Japanese, who essentially was unchallenged in a lot of ways. And then on top of that, we were able to supply all of Europe to fight back against the Nazis. And obviously, there's a lot more to that. You had the Russians coming in from the east and all that. But a large part of the reason that that was able to happen the way it did was due to our production capacity. And we've taken that production capacity and given it away.
Can we get it back?
Well, yeah, we need to build the factories
Do you
back. We need
think-
to create laws that say companies can't just have their industry overseas. If you're an American company, you need to make your stuff in America.
Do you think, aside from being terrible at public speaking, that was one of the reasons that the establishment hated Trump? Do you think because one of his narratives was he wanted to bring manufacturing back to the United States, and he started to not only incentivize but penalize companies for keeping their production outside of the United States. And it seemed like there was a shift happening.
Yeah.
Do you think if there's so much corporate dollars in politics that they were like, this guy's going to fuck up our bottom line, we need him out of here, among
so
other things?
The thing about Trump, right? Like, Trump had the ability to say a lot of truths, but when he went into power, he took the standard Republican cabinet and put it in power. Yeah, Trump did some things, like he exposed the fact that we make all of our shit in China and across the world, not here.
Yeah.
But in terms of what he did for it, he didn't really do anything. He just exposed it, told truths that people can resonate with. And then when it came to him doing something about it, he didn't do it.
Right.
You know, him and Bernie Sanders ran on populist messages, right? You had Bernie Sanders coming from a left-leaning populist message, and you had Trump coming in with a right-leaning populist message. Both of them, if you listen to both of their speeches back in 2016, both of them said a lot of similar shit in certain areas. One
of the problems, though, is that the Democratic Party seemed to totally railroad Bernie Sanders.
Oh, 100%. I mean, like, for instance, Bernie, you know, I mean, they literally, when all those DNC emails leaked, they were actively working against him. They were actively sabotaging his campaign, and he still got 46% of the vote. Bernie Sanders is just a classic New Deal Democrat from 1940. He's not like some insane socialist or anything like that. He's a democratic socialist, and in Europe he would be like a moderate. If you compare him back to American politicians from 1940, he'd be like a moderate left-leaning. So it's not like he's like his policies are insane, but in the current environment we have, he does seem fringe just due to the fact that we've come so far right in America. Like, the Democratic Party is a right-leaning party in the world stage.
You think so? Right-leaning? Do you
hands
mean
down.
like
So economically speaking, yes, hands down.
economically speaking? Yeah.
They are the Democratic Party has the same platform as the Republican Party back 40 years ago. They're a neoliberal party. They're a conservative in terms of economics. They're a conservative party, and the Republican Party is just the reactionary equivalent to them. They're always going to push right because they can't go left.
Yeah.
So they're always going to push the conversation more and more right. Like Obamacare, the ACA, was Mitt Romney's healthcare plan in Massachusetts. And Obama was like, I'm going to outsmart them and take the Republican Federalist Society healthcare plan and pass that as the Democratic bill. And that's why the Republicans were like blindsided, because it was their plan. What idea can they come up with when that was their plan?
That's like that scene in 8 Mile when Eminem starts saying everything they were going to use against him.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally, Obama said, well, fuck this. I'm just going to use their plan. And we'll see what happens. And he was able to pass it because what real opposition can the Republicans give if he took their plan, their platform, and passed it
Yeah.
as a Democrat?
But they still gave a lot of opposition to Obamacare.
Of course, because like the Republican, so like the way American politics works, number one, they're both paid by the same interests. That's number one. So we have one party and it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
The Republicans' job is to be controlled opposition for the Democrats, where it's like the Democrats are going to pass something, the Republicans are going to try to stop it. And the Republicans are much better at playing politics than the Democrats. It's hands down. When it comes to when the Republicans get into power, they take things further to where when so they take things further, make things worse, whatever it is. And I'm not saying like all their ideas are bad or anything, but they'll deregulate, they'll make sure corporations have more power. And then when the Democrats come back into place, if the Republicans took us 5 steps to the right, the Democrats will take us 1 step back to the left. But now we've just lost ground on 4 steps. And it's been like that for 40 years to where like, you know, if we're constantly on this slope to having more corporate power or to having corporations have more power over the American people and the whole 9 yards, and both parties are working in the same interests, you're basically, it's like painting a car blue or red every 4 years. There's no difference. It's the same car.
Same car. It's 2 wings on the same bird.
Yeah.
But
it's just the rhetoric, the culture,
rhetoric,
the cultural aspect.
propaganda. We've talked about this. If you were to watch Fox News and CNN side by side, it looks like they're talking about 2 completely different realities.
100%.
Right? But both claim to be the truth.
Yep.
You know, but the truth is often somewhere. There's like the 3 sides of the truth: your truth, my truth, and the actual truth.
Yeah.
You know, but it's almost like that 48 laws of power, the divide and conquer. Like we're easier to be controlled if we're bickering with each other over social issues.
Yeah. So like let's step back to the point I made like 10 minutes ago, right? When I was talking about we need to realize it's the 99% versus not even the 1%. It's the 99% versus like the 0.1%, like the top 5,000 people in the country, really. If you take the 99% and divide them into 3 parties, right? 30% of that 99% don't want anything to do with politics. They hate it. They hate looking at it. It's miserable. It makes them sad, the whole 9 yards. Then you have the other 2/3 bickering amongst one another. And those two factions either are all the way Democrat or all the way Republican, and you can't compromise because you have Fox News on one side spitting a whole nother reality to the contrary beliefs of the Democratic side, which is MSNBC and CNN. Well, now you've just divided the population into essentially 2 parts, and one part is just gone. Now you take those 2 parts of the population and you divide them even more. Like you split them on every little like defining line you can, whether it be like, you know, you're gay and straight, black and white, anything in between, whatever it is, you're divided now. And you divide everyone on that end, and then on the other end you divide everyone like it's either Trump or die. Like that's it. We're stopping here. And you divide the right on all these other issues, and they're a little better. They're way better at unifying behind candidates than the Democrats. But you get the point. You just divide everyone into like all these little factions of people. Well, now you've taken the rhetoric of class politics and completely eliminated it from the conversation. So how can we fight for a more just economic system, which again would still be capitalist, but would just be better for everyone, except like your top 5,000 people.
The problem is getting everybody together in the same room when people are arguing over these passionate social issues. We can all agree
Yeah.
that our kids deserve to make more money and be able to afford a living wage. I say our kids, I don't have children.
No,
but
I know what you
like
mean.
if you understand, if you're talking about the future of our country, we should all be able to come together and say, like, we want our kids to work 40 hours a week and to be able to live a good life.
Yeah.
And whether they're gay, straight, whatever. But the problem is people are so enraged
Yeah.
about social issues.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably done intentionally, like what you're saying.
Well, 100%, because like if you have two factions of the population that literally feel like the other side is going to end democracy, well, then they're an existential threat.
Yeah,
they're
no
no
point in
different.
even talking to them.
Yeah, they're no different than like the USA versus the Soviet Union back in like the 80s and 70s and before that, right? Like it's no different than that. Instead of having your enemy across the sea, you have your enemy next door.
Yeah.
And like now you have people not even able to have a conversation in politics, whether they agree or disagree, due to the fact that that could be an enemy, that could be someone, like they could be dangerous, whatever it is, whatever stigma they have in their head. When in reality, if you look at what Americans agree on, issue by issue, Americans typically agree on almost everything. Should we have a better healthcare system? Yes. Should we make sure corporations pay their fair share in taxes? Yes. Should we ensure that tax dollars go to public interest as opposed to private subsidies? Yes. Americans agree on everything, whether it be weed legalization, freedom of speech, everything. Like Americans, it's like 70, 80, 20 issues. You know what I mean? Like we agree on pretty much everything. In Florida, we passed a $15 minimum wage and voted Trump in at the same time. I mean, like two opposite ends of the spectrum if you just think everything's based on party politics.
Right.
So it's like, given that, I feel like the real problem is you don't have any candidates, any leaders that have been able to break through that facade of American politics where it's like they're able to rise above that and have people understand that it's not about all these other issues. It's about what's going to make our country truly better, what's going to not improve the perspective of Fox News for you, but what's going to improve your actual life, your tangible life.
Yeah.
You know, if you're able to live a better life by saying with the social issues, we can talk about them in a separate dialogue, but to unite on the front that we need to expand democracy, expand our freedoms, ensure that every American can live a dignified life, and feel fulfilled and be able to work a job that they don't feel like they're a slave to. I feel like that's a message that we can all agree on. And I feel like you just haven't had the right people step up to promote that message properly.
Have you ever thought about getting into politics?
Yeah, at some point I would like to throw my hat at it, but like,
Yeah.
I would like to, you know, for now, like I feel like I need to just continue doing what I'm doing. Like when the time comes, like I would like to get into politics or even just further and further spread awareness to how our government actually works.
Yeah. The problem is that it seems like all of the people, the good people, which I commend that you're willing to do it, but all of the people, it's like, it's scary to get into politics. Like if you were to go against the establishment, like your life could be at risk.
Well, yeah,
You know
I mean,
what I
like,
mean?
yeah,
You
well,
could fucking end up like fucking suicided. Like anybody.
yeah. I mean, it's not even like a joke. Like, I mean, like
this
anything
is a real
is possible.
problem, dude.
You know, and on top of that, like, let's take it back from even that, right? If you get into politics, one thing that people have a problem of understanding is that no one is perfect. Like, in the age of social media, you're going to learn way more about candidates than you were able to 80 years ago. So because of that, people need to be more realistic with like, what's the average person look like? Number one, like, you're not going to have some puritanical person that comes out of nowhere and they're like Jesus walking that
Yes.
runs for politics.
Right.
Like every person's going to have their own like thing.
Right. So
You
you're
know,
saying
like-
you start running for politics. Now all of a sudden somebody's going to want to dive into your past and look for if you like.
Yeah, like let's say they find pictures of me like smoking weed or doing
Right.
something like that, or like
Right.
being a person.
Right.
You know, like if Americans aren't realistic about what the average person does on a regular basis. And we're just looking for a saint to come and fix everything. It's not going to happen. People, like, Americans need to realize that if and when normal people run for politics, everyone's going to have their own spin. Everyone's going to be their own person. You're going to see things about them that you're like, I didn't know that. Like, and you might not even know how to feel about that. But Americans need to understand, like, if we live in a free society and everyone has the right to do what they want to do, you're going to find things that you might not agree with.
Right.
But if you agree with their message and you understand that and you trust them, but you just don't agree on every little thing in their personal life, you should still vote for that person, because if they hold up and they're truthful and they're not accepting all these dollars and they're just a person and they were doing their own shit until they decided to run. Like, we need to be a lot more realistic about what the average person looks like, what they do on a daily basis, and not be so critical as to what that might look like. Now, I'm not saying if someone like killed someone or did something insane, not to give them that judgment when they run for politics. But I think Americans need to be more understanding about the average person and what the average person might come out on them, number one. Because that, I feel like, scares most people into even thinking about getting involved, because they don't want their shit blasted
Yeah.
out of repercussion of what people might think.
Well, otherwise we end up with these politicians who have just been like groomed their entire life to become a politician.
And they're power hungry, and they focus their entire existence on obtaining power. And people like that, yeah, they might have a damn near flawless image, but if their entire goal is to be God King of America or whatever their like fantasy is, well, I mean, like, they're not going to be the right person to run the country, because if their entire thing is just obtaining power and it seems like they have a clean image and they have like a nice charismatic speech to them, but they're genuinely like terrible. Like, I would rather have the person that has pictures of them smoking weed and,
Right.
and being a normal person, because at least with that person, I can relate with them to begin with.
Yeah.
And that's just, I feel like that is a big part of why people don't even want to get involved, because they feel like, you know, you're going to be vulnerable to what comes out on you. And I feel like the first people that really come to break that illusion that people don't have to be perfect to run for politics, the first people that really try to break that mold are going to have a very thick skin. And then understand that they need to give a lesson in what it looks like to just be a normal person on the public stage, you know.
I think that it feels like we are at a precipice in our country, that it's either like this is the end of an empire, and it actually might be, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have all the characteristics of failing empires of the past.
Yeah. And what's the way out? You know, is it the Klaus Schwab, you will own nothing and be happy? Or is it communities start getting together, having these discussions about what's going to be best for their community, finding a great spokesperson for that message, and then voting that person into a position of power and sending them up through the ranks?
Yeah.
Like, that's what has to happen. That's why I've had people running for Senate on this platform, because like, we often overlook these local elections or regional, whatever, besides the president. No, everybody just waits to vote for president, right? Votes the ticket or whatever.
Very limited. I mean, the president has a lot of power, but you're correct. Like, you can't just wait for the president. You don't understand how important it is to elect state representatives.
Yes.
You don't understand how important it is to elect federal representatives and senators. All those small positions, like the head of the school board, all these positions matter.
But there's no place to get information on that. Like,
Well,
all
and
you do is you
that's by
see the
design.
signs on the side of the road.
Yeah.
You know, that's
And
it.
unless you spend 3 hours actually going through, and on top of that, educate yourself enough to know what those platforms even mean.
Yeah.
I mean, you're fucked. You don't know what you're reading. Like, half the time, like, all of it's like written in a way that sounds really good, but when in practice, because of the way it was specifically written, it's literally meant to fuck you, but they
Yes.
put a nice bow on top of it.
Yeah. I mean, anytime I read some of these like platforms, you see that it's like creative marketing language.
Yeah.
You know, the way they're putting it together, where that, oh, well, that sounds great, but like you said, when you put it into action, that's actually not good at all.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, what was it? It was, I remember, like, back it might have been in like 2014 or something. There was like an original medical marijuana bill or something like that that came onto the ticket. And the bill itself was cool because you're like, I think it was recreational or whatever. But if I'm not mistaken, it sounded really cool because you're like, oh man, they're going to legalize weed or whatever else, right? But then when you look at it, they're giving all the power of the industry in Florida to like 3 companies. You know what I mean? So it's like a double-ended sword because now you're going to have giant financial interests like taking control of a fucking plant.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like if they seize all the means of production for a plant,
I think that's
which
what's
I
happening
think is
right now
already
with
stupid.
Psychedelics. There's this push
Yeah.
for use of psychedelics in the medical field, and they're allowing it in certain places. But I guess what I didn't consider is what you're saying, that it's going to end up the government's going to be controlling it, and that's
Well, yeah.
not
I mean,
the
like,
best.
you know, like, again, like I'm not. We can expand this conversation to all drugs.
Yeah.
But when it comes to specifically your natural, plant-based drugs,
Yes.
like mushrooms and weed, let's
Yeah.
just stick with those because those
Yeah.
are the main ones that
Yeah,
everyone
that's
will know.
fair.
Mushrooms grow out of cow shit. Weed is a normal plant that before it was made illegal grew everywhere.
Yeah.
And on top of that, when you look at the benefits of the treatments, like weed can help people get off of worse drugs. It can help ease anxiety. The detrimental effects of smoking weed is way less than taking Xanax and all these other drugs.
Yeah.
And there's a whole host of benefits to weed. When it comes to mushrooms, number one, have a long precedent over the course of like essentially like human evolution over the last so many thousands of years with written culture, that they had very integral parts in a lot of cultures.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Christian sects in Europe that used psychedelic brews to to help practice Christianity and get closer to God.
Yeah.
The Native Americans used all kinds of brews to help alleviate mental illness. And even in America, like there's plenty of people, that did mushrooms and were able to cure things in themselves, like bipolar disorder, whatever else that medicine couldn't do, like modern medicine couldn't do. And due to that, when it comes to specifically mushrooms and weed, it's number one, a ton more research needs to be done. But the fact that you want to regulate and make these substances, class Schedule 1 substances.
Yeah.
When they're like the least harmful of all the drugs that are out
Right.
there, including most of the pharmaceuticals that they prescribe.
Yeah.
It's insane.
One of the biggest, I think, killers of people ages 18 to 36 in the past couple years has been opiates.
Yeah, it is.
Opioids, should I say.
I mean, it's same thing.
Another great example is kratom tea. We're in a kava bar and we sell kratom tea. This is a natural leaf that we brew into a tea that, gets rid of anxiety, and depending on the strain you're drinking, gives you motivation.
And alleviates pain. And on top of that, there's a lot of people that used to be addicted to heroin.
Yeah, that it saved
helps
their
them,
life.
Yeah, it helps them get off it because it hits the same system in your brain
Yep.
that opiates hit.
But without the respiratory suppression that heroin does, right? So if you ever have too much kratom, you're going to get a little nauseous. You're never going to, like, God forbid, die, right?
Yeah.
But every couple years or every few months, you hear this push for the government wanting to ban kratom, wanting to make it illegal. Not only that, wanting to schedule it as a Schedule 1 drug because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't help but think that is because it's cutting into pharmaceutical sales.
Well, that's 100% what it is. That's one of the biggest reasons why it's been a fight to get weed legalized to the fullest extent, and to get mushrooms legalized, is due to the fact that the biggest inhibitors to the legalization of those two drugs, those two substances,
Are
are pharmaceutical lobbying
lobbyists.
dollars. Yeah. Because again, it goes back to that antidote with, like, if you're to cure cancer, you're not going to get those profits for chemo anymore. It's the same thing. If someone finds a better outlet to help them with their depression or help them cope with all these different things that happen in their lives, and they actually find themselves in a much better place without taking drugs every day because they do a mushroom trip every 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, now you've just eliminated thousands of dollars per person for the treatments.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, again, it goes, the profit motive is always that main frontline priority that plagues our entire society in a lot of ways.
It's so unfortunate, especially when it's tied in with what I'm an entrepreneur, and I love creating brands and communities around those brands. And I love the idea of a creative product that helps people. But knowing that that is the tiny seed of like, highly detrimental corporate greed there's like a little bit of like inner turmoil there, but I think I've said this before, like I think capitalism is a good thing because it's a good driver to innovation and creation but unchecked capitalism is fucking dangerous.
I mean, like when it comes down to like small scale capitalism, like like your business, mid scale capitalism where it's like regional businesses that are like actively part in the communities, like I don't see a problem with those companies just due to the fact that like number one, the small business owner is the backbone of our society in a lot of ways. I mean, like if you deal with a small business owner, like you're number one, you're gonna actually talk to them, the owner. You're gonna like understand like who that person is, who's running that business. Like you're a part of the community in a lot of ways. Small businesses employ a large amount of the population. But small businesses are also like one of the main victims of the corporate consolidation from large scale capitalism or, essentially monopolist practices. I think everyone should have the ability to try to create their dreams, create their businesses. Like it creates a more diverse, unique environment in every community if everyone has the ability to like, create a business and get people behind them on their vision and like create a company that's truly part of the community. I think that's monumental. I think it's way more monumental than having a Walmart in every city, and that Walmart kills 30% of all the businesses.
Have you ever seen the documentary Walmart, The High Cost of Low Prices? It came out, I think, in 2010, maybe before that. And it shows how Walmart was targeting small communities, and they would just drive up and down the highway. They would find a small town that had like a hardware store, locksmith, optometrist, clothing store, right? And then a mile away, they would build a Walmart supercenter.
Yep.
And within a couple years, that downtown area is destroyed. And it happened all over the country. Now, I hate to say it, but we shop at Walmart for stuff,
because
and
there's no other place.
we don't have another option, right?
Yeah.
So I'm in line at Walmart, but I'm in line to check myself out at Walmart. There's 16 cash registers there. 2 of them are open, right? And the rest of it is like, and that comes down to profit, right? They employ less people.
Yeah.
There's less people to pitch a fit about how much they're getting paid or whatever. Like, I now work at Walmart. I'm now a cashier for Walmart, essentially. You know what I mean? I saw a funny meme that was like, Walmart, don't get mad at me if I forget to ring something up. I literally got no training before you hired me as a cashier. It's wild. And that's like, this is our reality now.
Yeah. And Walmart, as a side note, Walmart is the most notorious company for paying employees just enough to still qualify for food stamps. So it's
Holy shit.
they're employing less people. They have self-checkout, the whole 9 yards. And then Walmart's also the same company that makes sure that their average employee is, number one, given just enough hours to not qualify for full-time and paid just enough to qualify for food stamps. So who's on food stamps? Who's getting the government subsidies? Is it the worker or is it Walmart?
Wow.
And then that same worker can't go and get other jobs because then they lose their food stamps, and they're probably going to make more from just not working and taking the government subsidies and working at Walmart 20 whatever hours a week, because they'd have to work harder for less money to get a second job.
Oh, every time I keep circling back that it just feels so
Yeah.
doomsday-ish. It feels
like,
like
that's
automation and robots are gonna take over, and we're gonna like get our shit delivered to us via drone, and we're all gonna have on Oculus headsets. Like, have you seen Ready Player One?
yeah.
You're
I've seen like
familiar
a
with
lot
the
of clips of
movie?
it, and
Yeah.
it's like the metaverse or whatever.
They live in the metaverse, but outside of the metaverse, they're in like double wide trailers stacked 15 high.
Yeah.
We're at the lowest. Like, it feels like that's where we're headed.
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like there's a few different ways we can go. I think like that dystopian technological hellscape of like that world is definitely a possibility. If government doesn't get its act together and the uh, stops the creation of that dystopian-esque society, yeah, it's very possible
But
we
why
go there.
would they stop? They have no incentive to stop. Their incentive
Yeah.
is to continue status quo.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, their incentive, in my opinion, is okay, like, do you not have family? Do you not have kids? Do you not have, like, people that you actually give a fuck about,
Yeah.
that you want to create a better world for them? Like, at the end of the day, if we don't curb our consumption and change our energy grid and, like, essentially try to stave off, like, climate change or one of those existential threats to humanity, do you want to leave your kid a world that's barely habitable, that doesn't produce enough food, that's constantly dealing with war because of famine and water shortages, mass migrations? Do you want to give your kid, your family, the future generations of everyone you love that world? I feel like the incentive structure is really just the existential threat that if you continue in this way, you're just creating a system that there's 100 existential threats in front of you, and your kids and everyone you claim to love are going to be the victims of that society.
But I feel like they don't see it that way because they don't feel the pressures that the rest of us feel. If
Yeah,
you are a
that's
politician,
literally it. You're detached.
yeah, and you're lining your pockets with corporate dollars, you're not thinking I'm leaving a bad world for my kids. Me and my kids are going to live on Elysium, another movie reference where they have that fucking thing orbiting the earth where all the billionaires live up there. Like, I think some people think that they are completely detached and they are the haves and we are the have-nots.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, that's the illusion.
I don't want to
But-
sound like a doomsday guy, but it feels like it
I mean,
sometimes.
like, I'll say this. Like, I don't even consider that to be like a doomsday outlook. I mean, like, you're really looking at the world as what it is.
Yeah.
And there's truly only one real outcome for it if it continues on its current trajectory. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the best way to approach the situation we're in is to truly understand the reality. And I feel like the real struggle is obviously like everyone uniting behind a common message and actually forcing change. But another real struggle is to fight the nihilism that you feel in that. I mean, like, I
Well
feel like,
said.
I follow politics like way closer than most people. I mean, like, I'm a little like OCD about it.
Yeah.
It's just my interest. But, like, at first, when I really started delving into politics and learning about like history and like a more fine detail, yeah, like I'm not gonna lie. At first, when you start learning how things really operate, like you do get depressed. You do feel nihilistic towards everything you see. You start seeing the intersectionality of everyone's lives and the politics behind what creates the environments you see. But that's why at this point, I'm a naturally optimistic person. But that's why I feel like I need to myself just spread a message of like, I don't care if you like Trump or you like Biden or you like Bernie, or I don't care what faction of politics you gravitate towards. We can have a conversation about politics. I might be on one side and you might be on the other side, but there's a lot we can agree on if we strip away the labels of our ideologies and actually focus on the issues at hand.
I think you and I are a great example of that. You know, some people would think if they looked at surface level of some of my views on things like that, I'm some fucking, you know, Trumper, which I'm not. Honestly, I was raised by a liberal mother. I was raised as a Democrat. I always felt that I was a Democrat. And it wasn't actually until the past couple years that I've seen some fuckery in the Democratic Party, and there's been more things for me in that seems a little bit more. Some people would say it's right, but to me it feels closer to center. That it just makes more sense to me. But you and I see eye to eye on almost everything pretty much everything we're talking about. I don't think of anything that we don't see eye to eye on. And I think this is a great example that if we stop listening to the news telling us that we disagree with each other, and you just have a conversation with somebody who might look at things differently than you, you can realize we're actually all on the same team here.
Yeah. I mean, if you label yourself a moderate or a centrist or a little conservative, and I label myself like a leftist or a liberal or a progressive or whatever you want to label us as, but we strip away all those labels and we just talk issue by issue like we have.
Yes.
And we talk about the anecdotes that we experience in life, and we talk about the things that we witness and what our perspective of the world is.
Yes.
The commonality behind it is there. I mean, like you and I, if we were to talk about like, well, the Republicans want to do this and that's what I'm for, and I'm like, well, the Democrats are this and that and that's what I'm for. If we talk like that, of course it's going to be a contentious debate.
Yeah.
And that's not how I feel like things should be. Like, I feel like if we have ideological differences, but at the same time can strip away the labels of that ideology and really just talk as people and understand that we're not that different.
No.
We can get a lot farther, and we can spread a lot more awareness towards the actual things that matter.
Yeah, I agree completely, man. I think, you know, first of all, your level of knowledge of these topics is really commendable, man. In a world when we're all distracted by the Kardashians and social media, to know that a young man like yourself is diving into like really the meat and potatoes of what's happening in our country does give me hope. Right? Because this is what it's going to take. It's going to take young men and women like yourself who are willing to look objectively at what is exactly happening in our world, what can be done to change it, and how can I inspire others to get on board. So I commend you for taking the time. And, you know, like you said, it's your passion. Like, I think it's not an option for you, right? You're just, there's like a calling to get this information.
Yeah.
And I understand that because I do the same thing with, you know, conspiracy theories and aliens. Like, I constantly just want to learn more.
We could even talk about like aliens and stuff like that. I love all those conversations.
Well, we can't do this podcast without talking about aliens. Do you believe that aliens are visiting our Earth?
Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, like, I think it's just there's so much evidence behind, like, if you have such a large sample size of people that are like, yo, I took a picture of this, or like, that was crazy in the sky. And like, it's not even like you have one-off individuals saying I saw aliens. It's like you have large swaths of people seeing these things like UFOs or whatever else. Like, I think it's hard to disprove, honestly. I mean, like, yeah, we might not have caught one as far as we know.
We have.
But yeah,
I'm going to let you know right now. There's this great new documentary series, UFOs, Documents Undeclassified.
I think I've seen that.
It's on Netflix.
Or I think I've heard
it is fantastic. There's a gentleman named George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. George Knapp is a journalist who has been digging into this topic for 30 years. Jeremy Corbell is kind of like his protege, so to speak, and they're the ones who have been leading the charge of releasing these government videos.
I'm just
of
curious.
UFOs.
Were those the two guys that were on Joe Rogan?
Yes.
Okay, so I've seen those interviews. And
I don't know
think
if George Knapp was on Rogan. Maybe he was. Jeremy Corbell has been on Rogan numerous times. Jeremy Corbell also brought on the gentleman who claims to have worked on reverse engineering UFOs, whose name always escapes me when I want to think of it.
Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar.
That was a really cool interview.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah, I think it's crazy.
But so, yeah, check out that one documentary. They say we have crafts. And one of the things, like you were just saying, is one of the women in the documentary says, everybody keeps saying, where's the proof? And she's like, we have the proof.
Yeah.
Like there's just document after document after
I mean,
document.
you know what's happening in the Senate right now, right? With the they were doing like UFO committees, basically, like trying to, like, they basically told the Pentagon to gather every little thing they know
Right.
about aliens and,
Yeah.
and UFO encounters and things like that.
And then they release
and then they
a
started
document.
releasing them and having hearings on UFOs.
Yes,
and
but
it's
the
crazy.
document that the Pentagon released was laughable.
Yeah.
It was not what everybody thought. Everybody thought they were going to come out and say, okay, there are aliens, they're
Yeah.
working with the US government, da 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 da. But it was just like, there are things that we don't know what they are.
Oh yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think the reality is, like, is that possible that, like, we're actively in communication with them? Like, yeah, anything is possible. I think the reality is, like, I'm sure, like, there's a possibility of, like, us having actual UFOs that are crashed on Earth and we
Yeah.
found them, and they're more like archaeological artifacts.
Yeah.
I think that's more possible. I think the most plausible thing is that, like, we've seen them, we've actively experienced what they can do. Like, there's aircraft videos of, like, in the jet's cameras, it shows UFOs doing maneuvers that we have no fucking
That's
clue
right.
how
There's
that's
the
happening.
gimbal video, the Tic Tac video. Yeah.
It's insane. Like, I think that I would almost say is like a certain, like, that's as certain as you're gonna get.
Yeah.
The crashes and things like that, like Roswell. I think that, like, honestly, there's just so much to it that I'm like, it's more than just a fucking weather balloon.
Yeah,
It's
there's
clear.
there, as they say.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that there's another theory that we're saying that these are UFOs. We don't know what they are. That maybe we've reversed engineered something and we have actually created a technology that moves in this way. And
yeah.
we're testing it, quote unquote, testing it on our own military. Like the Tic Tac video is Commander David Fravor. He's a fighter pilot, fighter jet pilot, and he starts like chasing this thing. Well, there's a theory that was actually us testing that equipment. Like, let's drop them over here by this aircraft carrier and let's see can they keep up with them? Can they figure out what they are and
Just
whatnot?
test it out.
I think I've heard for years that the government has technology that's 50 years in advance of what the public
I've heard
has.
that too.
Right?
I've heard that too.
So I don't think that's off the table either.
No, I mean, like, what, like, why we spend $900 billion a year on the military, right? Like,
That's what's
the
we
amount of
say. That's what
technology.
we say.
Oh,
That doesn't include the black stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, they tried doing a partial audit of the Pentagon back, like, what, 10 years ago or something like that, and they actually came back and said it's impossible. Like, they don't keep enough records, they don't keep track of the money. We have no idea where this is going. We have
Holy
no idea what's
shit.
happening. And that was like, like a real Senate audit. I mean, like, that was supposed to be taken serious, and it came back inconclusive. Like, it would not, like, I totally believe, like, we have technology that goes out 20, 30 years, like, whatever you don't see now, but will exist in 30 years already does, and it's just, top secret or whatever else.
I have that theory
totally
about
believe
cell
that.
phones. You know how cell phones every year, like, just get twice as good every year? I have a theory that when cell phones first came out, we had the technology to do this, but we had to slow release it. Because otherwise, like, it's not really, you're telling me every year we're able to make the chips smaller and smaller? Just so happens that every year we can make them smaller, or have we been able to do it that small the whole time, but we just weren't ready yet?
I feel like, when it comes to, like, Apple, right, that creates these phones,
Yeah.
I think, like, they already know how they would make those smaller chips from, like, 3 years from now, and they're not gonna do it because, like, if they can give you a phone next year, they're gonna make more money and just squeeze the shit out of you,
the
right?
profit incentive.
Now, when it
slow
comes to the
releasing it.
government, which is separate from Apple and those companies, I feel like the government, chips that we'll have in, like, 10, 20 years, I think the government's the one that'll actually have the technology that's what we'll see in 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, there's a new technology that they're trying to build out, but they don't have a use for it really, and it's like 3D chips, where it's like it's not like a flat circuit board. It's essentially like a legitimate chip that's meant for, like, wearable devices or whatever else.
Holy shit.
And there's just no use for those chips yet, just due to the fact that we don't have the technology, or we can create the technology, but it's just not there yet.
Yeah.
There were some, like, SPAC stocks during COVID that created those concepts, but there's no practical use for them yet.
So we think.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm sure the government wouldn't know what to do with it. I'm sure they're probably in the drones and everything we have
Right.
for the government now.
Right.
Or even like go all the way like to like the extreme of what's possible. Like if those UFOs are actually just secret government technologies.
Right. They're probably
That's
using
where they're
those
at.
chips in it.
Exactly.
For the sake of current events, have you heard about the IRS hiring 78,000 new agents?
87,000, yeah.
And training them, weapons training them?
I have heard of that. I mean, like, I can only really speak on like kind of like what's in the bill, what's typically like
What is the name of that bill?
the IRA.
It's
The IRA is the umbrella bill that has all the other provisions in it.
it's the Inflation
Reduction Act. Yeah.
which really stands for we're going to take money from regular Americans at gunpoint.
So I'll tell you what, like we already kind of spoke about this. Like the Democrats have a way of really shooting themselves in the foot when it comes to passing a bill. Like if you were to pass a bill that expanded the IRS, but then you put in that same bill, these IRS agents are only to go after the people that are avoiding taxes that are like extremely wealthy. Like the average like billionaire does not pay the taxes they owe. You know what I mean? Like because the audits behind those people are way more complex than a W-2 worker that's making tips. They really should have passed it to where, okay, we're going to add 87,000 IRS agents. These IRS agents are only for people that make over $3 million a year or something
Right.
insane.
Right.
I don't know why you wouldn't pass that because like the average person that's making $5, $6, $7 an hour as a server and then they make tips. What psychotic world do you live in? You're going to go after them for audits. Like that's the dumbest thing ever.
You know what? I have a theory. It's all this money that they gave out during COVID.
Trying to get it back.
Well, listen, I was watching people through social media and stuff who were advertising that they can get you government dollars. That was like the CARES Act or something like that. All you need to do is open up an LLC, say that you're an Uber driver, and I can get you $20,000. You give me 5,000 of it, and you're good. I'll fill out the paperwork for you. I saw pictures of billboards in Las Vegas. The government still has $1 trillion left to give out. Contact us today. I think there was a lot of fraud that happened, and a lot of money got funneled to people who weren't supposed to have it. And maybe the government knows that, and now they're putting together this team to go round it back up.
I mean, definitely possible. I think that's stupid when it comes to the little guys, just due to the fact that it's like, just like leave these average people alone at this point. Like you're always going to have that margin of people that fucks the system, that commits fraud and all these things. And those people should definitely be held accountable. But we printed a very small amount of money for the average people, like the small business loans and the average American.
Yeah.
We printed a very small amount of money for them, and basically told them to go fuck themselves for 2 years and figure it out. We printed at the same time trillions of dollars and dumped it into Wall Street and all these other companies. I would say, like, if you want to go after fraud, go after the companies that, because of the CARES Act that passed, and just like basically set the conditions to like have, billionaire wealth increase by like $1 trillion or $2 trillion in 2 years. Go
We
after
all watched
those
it
people.
with Bezos, like his net worth or whatever just skyrocketed.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, and like again, like there were so many subsidies that they got. Go after them, like what, like these
But
companies.
history shows they won't.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, like I'm in agreement with you. Like, I think the majority of those IRS agents, because it's a 10-year plan for that IRS package, because you have the average IRS worker essentially on the verge of retirement, and we don't have the backfill of employees to replace them. So that's what this bill is really for.
Okay.
But we don't put in we don't put in the laws, the amendments, to say these IRS agents aren't to go after your average people. They're to go after, the people that they just don't have the manpower to audit to begin with.
Right.
I think it'd be a way better use of, number one, like giving people more faith in the government, giving people, make people feel like, you know, like the government in some way does have their back a little bit. If they would have just wrote into the bill, these IRS agents that we're hiring are not meant to go after the regular person.
Yeah, but if they wrote that in, that means that's what they were going to do. So it's like, is there a reason that's not written into the bill? Just for the sake of, so
I mean, like,
unfortunately, I
yeah.
can't show it on my computer, but
Yeah.
you guys, I'll share a link to this video. Like, I don't know, do IRS agents need weapons training? I'm trying to find
I'm
this
not too
clip.
familiar with them. I mean, I will say this, like, I don't think it's going to be, let's see here.
So these are IRS agents, and they're going into weapons training.
I don't know. I have to look into this. I'm not too
Dude.
familiar.
This looks like something from a Saturday Night Live skit.
And I think it will unfold like one. Honestly, like I don't think there's. What the fuck are they gonna do? Like, you're gonna tell me an accountant is
Right.
going to go up to a fucking door with a gun and like
Right.
expect
What is
to collect
happening
taxes
here?
from a
What
dude
it
that might
doesn't
actually
make
know
any
what to do with
sense.
that thing? I think it's stupid. I don't. I whatever the.
And how
purpose
much
of
money did that
is.
cost?
Well, exactly. I mean,
The
like,
weapons training of 80-something
you know,
thousand people?
here's a quick like $80 million to train these 87,000 people in weapons training. I think it's stupid. Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to get an accountant to enforce stuff by gunpoint. It's just never going to happen. I think if there is a purpose for that, that's malicious. It's going to be comical at the end of it.
Yeah.
I think whatever it is, it's probably stupid.
Weird. It's
there's a
funny
lot
the
of
stuff
stuff
they
that's
spend money
stupid.
on, man.
You know, if you showed me a video of IRS agents that looked like mercenaries, I'd be like, all right, that's pretty sus.
Ah.
But the fact that we just saw like regular looking accountants
Yeah.
with pistols doesn't really scare me that much.
Well, maybe it's scarier.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
they might miss and shoot someone they're not supposed to.
Right. Right.
But like, you know, at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of, like I said, the Democrats have a distinct ability to do things that look unbelievably stupid. They have a terrible way of making sense.
Which
honestly,
is frustrating if you're a
oh,
Democrat.
it's fucking stupid. You know, like I'm more along like, am I like a registered Democrat? Like, yeah, but like, would I more so label myself like an independent? Yeah, I don't see the point of changing the party.
Yeah.
You know, what's the point? I don't care. But yeah, I mean, I look at the Democrats and what they do, and like 99.9% of the time, I look at what they're doing, and I'm like, you guys are like fucking
Is
idiots.
this
Like, it's fucking stupid.
is this a sketch comedy act?
Yeah, like that's fucking ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
you've seen real life events it happen in our politics that Saturday Night Live couldn't nail better.
Right. Right.
You
Like,
know?
reality is stranger than fiction
Oh,
at times.
hands down.
I make the comment all the time. It feels like we live in a Batman movie. Like, what is this? Is this real life? Like, you see characters like Klaus Schwab or whatever. Like, have you seen this guy? You know who I'm talking about? The World
I'm sure.
Economic Forum?
I'm sure I've seen a
He
video.
wears
of him.
like Star Trek suits and stuff, and he's like the unnominated, unelected person who thinks he's going to be running the world, and it's like, you can't write this shit.
No. I mean, like, I look at like pretty much 99% of the people that I see in power, like, they all come across as like fucking lunatics to me half the time. Like,
well, you
it's
have to be
stupid.
a little bit, right, to be willing to do a job like that. You have to be either somebody who's dedicated to helping people,
Or a narcissist. Yeah, I think the people that actually go for power's sake, are never going to be the right people.
yeah,
Like, the people that actually are like going to be good roles for like leadership positions in politics are most likely the people that want no part of it. And you can only hope that those people meet the moment in that way, because the people that we have in power now, I think it's pretty obvious they don't give a fuck about anything but like themselves.
yeah. It's sad and scary, man. Now, I know we've touched on it a little bit before, but let's just say you have a magic wand, right? You're given a magic wand to wave to set us on a path towards a better existence for the average American in this country. What does that magic wand move look like? What do you think is how do we get this thing rolling in the right direction?
I think number one, first and foremost, is to get money out of politics, and in getting money out of politics, create the public funding of elections. I think that's first and foremost. I don't see a way forward without that. When it comes to democracy itself, I think democracy should be, if you're from Florida and you're voting for the president, I think it's one person, one vote. That's it. Just your vote is that you're not voting in a district, and your district has to win in order to like count for that guy. Like
The electoral
I think,
college, right?
I think
Doing
direct.
away with the electoral college.
Well, yeah, that's part of it, but just in general, like a more direct democracy. That's not that represents the people more. Having referendum votes. Like if everyone in America wants to legalize weed is something easy to conceptualize. And enough people vote in like the primary to put it on the ballot nationally. I think we should have national referendums that can pass laws. Because I think, if you have bad laws put into place by people that don't actually give a shit about your well-being, there's at least a direct mechanism to counter that. I think like ranked choice voting, where it's like even like third parties can have a lot more say in the conversation. I think that's another really good style of voting that should be put in place. I think I think workers should have the right to unionize, and like I think there should be laws in place that protects workers and allows them to unionize without such drastic pushback that's undemocratic. I would say those are the main things. And then after that, it's like giving people I think college should be free. Like I think everyone should have the ability to go to trade school and actually try to fulfill their dreams, like go after the things they want. If you want to be a doctor and you have the grades to get into the school, I don't think you should be in 600 grand in debt. And you take that across the board. I think teachers should get paid more, number one. Number two, I think, if you're going to be an educator, I think being a teacher is one of the most important jobs you could have. School should be free. I think, in general, making school free for everyone through college would be a massive step in the right direction. Because right now, the main reasons why the younger generations are so held back is in large part because of the debt they had to accumulate. Those are that. Me personally, I would say a national healthcare system would be the best way forward, because if you nationalize it, in other countries, doctors still make an insane amount of money, but they're paid based on their results as opposed to just being good business people. I think if you do that, when it comes to like the police, like I think like the police have their part, and I think there should be like a social worker equivalent to that, so police aren't like answering mental health calls. I think you need to expand mental health care throughout America, and not have one umbrella to handle all of those things. I can go on. I feel like
all of
forever,
those to
but
me are
I feel
great.
like those are societal changes that I feel like would help everyone.
I think it's incredibly well said. And I got to say, speaking with you, even though it felt like we're like, fucked, it's like, it does give me hope, because to know that, very intelligent, driven young man like yourself is focusing on these issues and can speak about them in such an articulate fashion, with passion yet reserve, it brings me hope, man. And
I appreciate
who knows, man, maybe we'll see your name on a ballot one day, and you can help enact some of this change. In the meantime, please continue educating people on what's important and what's happening. If people want to follow your messaging and what you have to say, what's the best way to do that?
So on YouTube and Twitch, you can follow me at the Dark Roast Hour. I don't have like a set schedule just yet, but I'm definitely going to get that, more established.
Cool.
Instagram, you can follow me at Cafe Nick, Cafe_Nick. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I have a credit repair business with my dad.
Oh, which we didn't even get into.
Oh no, it
I'll have you
you
back
get into
on.
politics, it's you can get me on rants forever.
But
But-
that's a great point. If anybody's looking to have their credit repaired, or at least just sit down and have a conversation of what that looks like, you should reach out to Nick also. I know I'm going to be doing the same. So
yeah. No, I appreciate you. So, but thanks for having me on, and
this has been fantastic, educational and eye-opening, and I really appreciate you, man.
for sure, I
Thank you
appreciate
so much, brother. You guys, thanks for being a fly on the wall during this conversation. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Go check out Nick. He's a smart dude and he's got a lot of important shit to say. So I think you guys should listen. Appreciate you guys very much. We'll
Thank
see
you,
you
guys.
next time. Boolah.
See you.